Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Will.
For our audience, Aaron Edwards is an EC second year student at Harvard Business School doing a joint degree in the MS MBA program. And while you're here, you are building the startup KiraGen.
Yes, that's it. KiraGen Bio.
Let's dive right in. KiraGen Bio is aiming to utilize AI, and there are a lot of companies utilizing AI now. It's very popular, but you're using AI specifically to tackle gene therapy and its uses around improving. Our problem was how to defeat cancer.
That's it. Yeah. So we are leveraging AI. There are tons of different ways to use it. As you mentioned, some companies use it for drug discovery purposes. So being able to use some machine learning and AI to discover novel targets or make a drug a different way. We are actually using AI to help justify some gene editing decisions we make on cells called CAR T cells. So there's a really cool technology out there that's already commercialized called CAR T, which stands for chimeric antigen receptor T cells. So this technology has really revolutionized the blood cancer landscape. So hematologic cancers are leukemias, some lymphomas. Yep. So they can take a patient's cells, do really cool stuff with them in the lab to engineer their own T cells, which prior to that have not been able to target their tumor, put them back into the patient, target their cancers. And for many leukemia and some lymphoma patients, they've led to complete responses that have lasted over a decade now. Unfortunately, this really cool technology has not translated to solid tumors. And, for the patient need, just to give you some context, solid tumors account for 90% of all cancers.
Right. So those are lung cancer, brain cancer, I believe, right? And, anything that's outside of the blood, right?
Yeah, correct. Anything that's sort of like a solid mass. There's some distinguishing characteristics there, but that's a pretty good generalization. So where the machine learning component comes in is being able to rationalize these high level combinations of gene edits that we make on a cell to try to translate that success that these CAR T cells have seen in the clinic to solid tumors. And the biggest problem we're solving, not just with AI, is the immunosuppressive environment that these tumors have. So you can imagine a solid mass of cancer. One is there because your immune system wasn't able to clear that tumor. So it's a buildup kind of mass of cells, and it has defenses, many different ways that it either is kind of shielding itself from your immune system, or when we give it sort of immunotherapies, there are ways to suppress. If it's a cell, it can suppress that cell and make it stop functioning. So the whole field, with a right market and kind of opportunity to be able to kind of give hope to these patients, everyone's trying to do that with their own different technology. Ours is a high level gene editing tech or strategy where we can actually protect those cells from the direct cause of that suppression and hopefully lead to patient benefit.
Well, that sounds like very noble and very important work to be doing. Well, let's dive a little bit into the intricacies. Well, our audience might be those specialized in the medical background, but we also have audiences that are interested in science in general or maybe understand things in more lay terms. So, it seems like more broadly, you're using AI to tackle gene therapy. Tell us a little bit of what is gene therapy.
Yeah, so most people would define gene therapy a little bit different from, say, a small molecule drug. So you might think of aspirin or some organic chemical compound. That's a small molecule. You take it in a pill or some other form. It has a certain impact on the target. Gene therapy, kind of broadly, is this transition to more precision medicine approaches. You can have where you're really targeting a specific gene, usually to say overexpress. So maybe a patient has lost the ability to express an enzyme, for example. You can deliver that gene to a specific organ or target tissue and give that patient the ability to express that enzyme again.
What is the mechanism for delivery?
Yeah, so it depends on what the actual therapy is. So right now, most people might consider, if you're familiar with any gene therapies, a delivery mechanism called adeno-associated virus, or AAV. So that is a virus that can kind of package those instructions and is usually given IV, so like intravenous, or you can directly inject it to where you're going. And that will sit in the tissue, say the liver, for example, and it will express copies of maybe the enzyme that you're missing out on. So the liver is a common target right now because it's much easier to target, but it doesn't have to be these viral delivery systems. There are also non-viruses, which are, say, a really good example for another delivery would be the COVID vaccine. So lipid nanoparticles that can be packaged or with mRNA to a certain delivery site.
When you do these deliveries for gene therapy, is it forever? Is it the entire course, or is it shorter periods of like you would need to do gene therapy periodically throughout the rest of your life?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really varies based on the therapy itself. So, the liver is a great tissue target for some of these first gene therapies, because if the virus or lipid nanoparticle, so to speak, delivers to a certain cell and makes that modification, if a cell starts to replicate, it will dilute that therapy. So this say virus is not actually integrating into your genome. It's just sort of sitting inside that cell, reproducing whatever what protein you might want to express. So the liver actually doesn't it can regenerate, but it does not kind of rapidly divide. And so that's an ideal target for something like an adeno-associated virus. But there are also other concerns like the immune response. So your body can see the outside of those viral particles, or sometimes the lipid nanoparticles, that limits you to only have that specific therapy one time before your body might reject it in the future. So a lot of work on the delivery side is being done to either enable multiple doses, something like that, or just sort of create different versions that your body doesn't recognize, so that if you have a therapy now and something comes up in the future, you'll be able to kind of take advantage of this next generation technology as well.
Well, that sounds all very interesting and very complicated. Let's dive into your firm a little bit, KiraGen Bio. What was the motivation behind starting this work, and how has it been starting it with you and your co-founder?
Yeah, so my co-founder Ryan Murray and I actually met in 2015 when we worked at one of the sort of leading gene therapy companies at the time, Bluebird Bio. So we were both working on T-cell type therapies. So he was in what they called the immunotherapy group, working on synthetic biology approaches. So that would mean sort of our ability to change the biology, not with gene editing, but via some other way to overcome those same obstacles that a solid tumor kind of poses. I was working on Bluebird's gene editing technology, which were called megatals. We don't need to go into that for another day. So we've been working together for quite a long time. 4 years after we met, I moved to Beam Therapeutics, which is a kind of CRISPR 2.0 gene editing company. And Ryan followed me over pretty quickly. And there we actually kind of we saw the power of what next generation gene editing tech could have on these T-cell therapies and other modalities. So we still focused on these T-cell therapies. And I was actually what's called in vitro biology lead. So sort of everything before mouse modeling. I was the lead for what Beam Therapeutics' now clinical CAR T program is, Beam 201. So we got a lot of experience there and saw the power of these kind of multiplex, which is just means multiple, the ability of these next generation gene editing tech, the power it could have to unlock the potential of those cells. This program at Beam was also for a blood-based cancer, and we thought one day, this similar type of technology or a next generation gene editing tech should be used to also unlock the potential to see if we could translate that to solid tumors. So one thing led to another. I was at Beam for about 4 years. I went back to school here, so I'm second year at HBS. Ryan is actually now finishing his PhD through Northeastern, focusing primarily on this exact sort of or one component of this strategy, I would say, which is using gene editing to target what is called the hypoxic environment of the tumor. So hypoxic just means lack of oxygen. And so he was looking at ways in a very specific, his PhDs are very specific on one kind of component, this hypoxic nature, which is lack of oxygen component of the tumor microenvironment. So we were kind of furthering our education along, and actually through HBS's coursework is how this really started. So in the RC year, you take an entrepreneurial management class, TEM, as a lot of people know it, and one of the classes you actually make a pitch deck. And so Ryan and I have kept in touch for a long time, and I said, "Hey Ryan, like we should come up with if we were coming up with a company, what would it be?" We sort of started brainstorming a little bit, and one thing led to another. We loved the pitch deck. We really got excited by this idea, and it's not one insight you have; it's multiple insights along the way. So the three sort of big buckets we say are no one is really utilizing the ability to use this next generation gene editing tech to make many different gene edits on that side of a cell. So say like the first generation CRISPR, you can compare them to scissors. So nucleases are scissors that cut the genome. They do a really good job at that. They're very precise, and they cut the genome in a specific location that can be programmed. You might imagine you wouldn't want to cut the genome at many different places at once, or your DNA is sort of like chopped spaghetti. And so that's where these next generation technologies, base editing, prime editing, et cetera, can then actually make a modification that's similar to that first generation tech. You can do many of them. So that's one barrier that no one really until recently has been able to do. So now we can say, oh, we have the ability to target many different things at once. So why not try to target as many barriers that these tumor cells have at making these cells efficacious at once? And also, we need some tool to justify those decisions. That's where the machine learning component comes in. So it's a mix of the field has the ability to make so many modifications at once. And we now can actually use machine learning as a tool to justify those decisions.
I see. And, tell us about the scope of the problem, right? This is solving a fundamental issue, which is saving human lives. What is the amount of roughly, how many people a year get solid cancer? Decades we've tried to tackle cancers with various tools, right? And we're advancing this field per se. We also have, I believe, increased cancer rates, as the environment gets more polluted, as we consume more microplastics and other chemicals. It seems as a whole in society, we're having this increased rate of cancer, but also because we're living longer as well, which is a good thing. How significant is the problem of cancer in society?
Yeah, it's hard to put exact numbers because cancer is so broad, right? There are many different types of cancer, but I'll give you one example of that, and is actually what the lead indication that we're using this for proof of concept. Is non-small cell lung cancer. So it is a huge unmet need in terms of patient population. So just for the US, for example, there are 200,000 new cases per year of non-small cell lung cancer. And that is increasing year by year. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, on the top of my head, the 5-year survival rate average, because there are different types of non-small cell.
The percentage of people that live past
5 years from diagnosis is less than 30%. Some of the more aggressive forms, it's in single digits. There's a broad. If you compared that to other indications, it's sort of all over the map with maybe 5-year survival rates or patient population size. But non-small cell is a large unmet need, and it's a large need not just because a lot of patients get it. So non-small cell is a type of lung cancer. It's not only a large patient population, but it's extremely hard to treat.
Mm.
So that sort of led us to think, if our hypothesis is true, if we can target the actual root cause of why, say, a cell therapy, for example, cannot benefit these patients, which is because their tumor microenvironment, like that suppressive environment I was talking about, is so aggressive, we should be able to go in and make a difference. And we would see that pretty quickly. So, it is a large market, say, from a drug marketing perspective, and people might think it's crowded, but if our product works, it
Right.
won't matter if it's crowded or not, because these therapies have not really made as big of an impact compared to other indications, or these cell therapies have had on things like leukemias.
I see. So what is the product? Like, what is the tangible product that you're really providing uh, to companies? Are you providing this to like other established firms who are building the gene therapies, and you're providing a tool that ultimately make their gene therapies more efficient?
Yeah. So this is sort of a classic. Are you an asset or a platform sort of company that we talk about a lot in school? We will be a therapeutics first company that has a platform now.
Mm-hmm.
We eventually will have all of our own
In-house
internal pipeline, but for now, our mission is to get our hypothesis about our therapeutic tested in the clinic as fast as possible. You can't help people unless you get your product to the clinic, and you need to do that as fast and safely as possible. When you're a small company, especially now when you're building, compared to 2020 when you could raise a lot more capital and maybe build on your own, the only way to do that is through partnerships. So there are many different pharma companies that we would love to partner with as early as possible so that they can use their already built infrastructure and get the product to the clinic. There's also another path where you can have these academic sponsored trials. So say a pharma partner wasn't interested in a more smaller indication at first. They want a bit more risk. They want sort of some of that risk lowered. We can actually partner with say MGH or the Brigham or the Dana-Farber to sponsor a trial. And once you get to that phase 1 clinical data, usually more companies are interested because the risk has been sort of lowered quite substantially that your product has potential.
Rather than make a massive upfront investment.
Yeah. So there are many different ways, and I would say back to KiraGen, we 100% want to partner. These complex therapies, you should not try to do everything yourself at first when you're building, because it would just take longer, and you are sort of preventing that patient impact by thinking that you can do everything alone and to retain all of your value. We've seen that time and time again, and so we will partner, learn over time, and take everything in-house that we can. And when we're to the point that we're confident in our abilities, we can then have our own internally developed clinical pipeline.
That's fantastic. Well, let's dive into a little bit as you develop this product, right? You and your co-founder, do you now have full-time staff as well working with you on the team?
We do not yet. So it's right now, it is myself doing sort of the business and financing, fundraising needs, and then Ryan is actually here at the Pagliuca Life Lab, right next to the iLab here, doing all the wet lab work himself. So we've been side by side in the lab for all these years, and he's completing his PhD, so he's super comfortable with that. We are hiring, so we are going to hire probably in the next couple months our first couple employees, which will be really, really exciting. And we're every employee that you bring in can just do that much more than we can by ourselves.
I mean, as we've learned in the business school classes, the first few employees are critical to shaping the company culture. How would you, as the CEO, as one of the co-founders of KiraGen Bio, what is your leadership philosophy? How do you view, building a team? How do you view the organization growing?
Yeah, I start first with transparency. So one perspective that Ryan and I get really excited by is the fact that we've actually had a lot of time working our way up from the bottom, so to speak, at these biotech companies. So we really know how labs operate, and we've seen what happens behind the scenes. I think for no fault of anyone's own, a lot of what could happen maybe at, I don't want to say lower levels, but lower levels from an HR leveling perspective or more junior employees is if there are issues, that game of telephone to the top is really hard. It's really challenging to get sort of problems that might happen at the bottom all the way up to executive level. And I think from that, to solve that problem, you have to start with yourself and a top-down approach. So overly communicate. If you think you're overly communicating, you're probably not communicating enough. Transparency. And then one thing we talk a lot about in classes as well is making sure that you are creating an environment for others where they feel safe and comfortable sort of debating or telling you, oh, I actually don't think that's the right approach. Because if someone is comfortable being sort of vulnerable with you, when there are actual problems, like real corporate or science problems in the future, hopefully you've built that environment where it's just part of the corporate culture to say, oh, we're having a problem here. By the time, usually in a lot of corporate structures, by the time that message gets to the top or those decision makers, it's way too late or really expensive to fix. And so I think that's my number one thing is communicating, making sure everybody knows, whether you're a scientist, whether you're in finance, how you are contributing to the company's vision and mission, because everyone plays an important role. And then that second piece is creating that environment that people feel comfortable kind of speaking their truths.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, in order to do this, you need to raise funds. Unless you can only bootstrap so much as you scale. And the biotech, I believe, is generally a more expensive industry to build a startup in. What is your goal, or what have you raised thus far, and what is your kind of goal for your company in the next year or so as you scale?
Yeah. So currently we are in 2048 Ventures Biotech Studio program. So they are an early stage pre-seed all the way, I think, to Series A VC company, and their biotech studio takes companies such as KiraGen and takes us from that 0 to 1 level. So you can kind of compare it to what a lot of people know as the YC or Y Combinator approach, where it comes with a set check on safe terms that are post money for a certain percentage equity. So they're giving you a certain valuation that is very, very founder friendly. And those simple terms allow us to start building as fast as possible. So there's no second guessing. So we were able to get into their studio at the end of late, just I think December, technically. So it was right around the end of the year. And they also have a really quick turnaround time. So I think that's another challenge that people have when fundraising is you're talking to a ton of VCs at once. And if you can't get a firm answer from them if they're going to move forward, it is also challenging for the person trying to get the money, not just from the VC's perspective. So 2048 has a 16 business day guarantee, essentially, where if the meetings go well, from the first time that you have a meeting to check in the bank is 16 business days, which is it's insane. So, we got this first check right at the end of last year. And you start building. So, we've been able, actually, as of yesterday, was a huge milestone for the company. We filed our first provisional IP. So our intellectual property. This is like the lifeblood of the capitalist society to protect what, or do our best to protect what we have. So that was a huge milestone for us. And now we're starting to do wet lab, right across the street at the Life Lab here. And so this program gives you enough money that you're not making detrimental decisions for the long term of your company. If you're a first time founder, you're just learning a lot along the way. Absolutely. So they provide support, not just financially, but maybe on pitch decks, on how to think about the next round. And they are now helping me strategize how we're kind of thinking about our cash burn for the next year. Right. So their program comes with a check of $250K, and that'll get us, we know exactly how long that will get us based on our current cash burn. And then over the next, say, couple months, we're going to then use that check and include it in the close of our pre-seed. So, that pre-seed, we have sort of a target in mind, and that then will project us out over the next year or so to make sure that we have a long enough time to start building, hiring the employees we want, and then getting to that next value inflection point to then get what people traditionally might call a seed round.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive into a little bit about the product. More specifically, now the AI component. As you mentioned earlier, the 2020, start of 2020, essentially, became very hot. The market, a lot of money was flowing around, so it was a lot of VC money going. But now, obviously, last year, especially going to this year, the VC market interest rates have made things more difficult for startup ventures to raise as a whole.
Yeah.
However, AI is kind of that one bright spot, essentially. There's been a lot of funding for AI ventures of all kinds. But then in early December, I believe, roughly a few months ago, ChatGPT released like this new custom bot feature where they're able to allow people to kind of do further customization. And now there's a whole marketplace for that now on OpenAI, on ChatGPT. And that actually took away a lot of what companies were pitching previously as a kind of a ChatGPT wrapper that's a little bit more specialized. What is your product? What is your AI product that is differentiated from simply, perhaps like taking a ChatGPT functionality? What is unique about your MVP?
Yeah, so we were really careful to follow those trends over time. So we started from the gene editing component. So we would be differentiated by just how many gene edits we're doing simultaneously in a product for quite a while. Actually, the machine learning component came in to keep that differentiation high and justify that kind of niche that we're in. So the biggest question, I would say, the transition in question from the last year AI, the last 2 year AI kind of funding boom, if you were almost forced to have AI ML somewhere in your pitch deck because people liked to fund that. It has, the conversation, this is really helpful for those listening, the conversation has changed to what is it doing for you now? What is it actually solving? So some people might have this expertise to get funding for those intellectual curiosity questions. Can we use AI to do something never been, that people can't even imagine, those sort of visionary AI companies? Our machine learning model is a real model that we've identified, tailored, adapted for our purposes to help us rationalize those gene edit decisions that we were talking about. So the biggest difference here is we had, when we went to 2048 and other people trying to get that first check, we had to tell them, this is our vision. This is a real machine learning model. We want to develop it. It's not fully developed. We're a pre-seed company. But here is the actual value proposition it has. Like, if we want to make this product, which we can talk about in a second, this model gets us from here to here in a way that's not possible to test in a wet lab alone, or it would take years to get there. And we're doing that sort of computationally and validating along the way with wet lab experiments.
For the VCs themselves, they're looking at, of course, getting equity. They're looking at getting a return for their product, and they're looking at helping guide, in some cases, some of the VCs out there provide real value, not only just money itself, but they have their networks, they have in-house specializations that allow the startups they invest in grow ultimately. What do you view as kind of a good startup? What do you view as a startup that aligns with your values as a founder, with your values as you build your company?
So these types of questions are a bit hot take, opportunities, I would say. I would say, maybe to reframe to Ryan and I's philosophy, when we thought about being a first-time founder, we wanted to put science on a slide that could be built today. So academia does a really good job at ideating, so coming up with those really grandiose kind of visionary ideas.
Yeah.
And industry then sort of translates those academic papers or concepts into actual therapies through structured drug development processes.
Okay.
When you're sitting here at the early company phase,
Mhm.
you can make that decision of, we might have a platform where we hope to discover a certain new molecule that has never
Okay.
been found before. Or you can go the approach that we went with. We know that this can be built based on our experience. It's an engineering problem. It's not a discovery science problem. And that was important for us to get sort of that conviction from external investors to start building today. So there will be barriers along the way, but it's really common in science. You can say you want to do something, but you have to figure out the science to get there. What we want to build, we have the expertise to build that product today. We just need to build the company and the workflow to get there. The machine learning component is definitely a work in progress, but we're also leveraging, this is where that value of the VC comes in. We're leveraging a current portfolio company of 2048s to help us until we can get internal employees and infrastructure work to make sure that that model is state of the art.
Absolutely. What do you view for, the industry itself, the biotech industry? What has been the trend? It's been so hot. Life science is so hot in terms of, so much new infrastructure is being developed. Life science campuses. Why is there such big investment in biotech and, in science?
Yeah. It is really a couple of things. It's the convergence of tools, so say academic tools to do really cool stuff, but maybe there hasn't been in the past the ability to translate that into something that's a controlled drug that can be given to humans.
Mm-hmm.
So now we are getting closer to that. We have tools to translate those awesome sort of almost science fiction Star Trek ideas that you see in academic papers. Those can translate now into the clinic. And now
what is the clinic?
Yeah. Sorry. Into clinical trials.
Got it.
So that's the biggest barrier has been reproducibility of academic work. That's not necessarily to the fault of their own. There are a lot of pressures in academia to publish. But a lot of the times, saying people might quote like 90% right now or 75% of papers, when someone tries to reproduce that or maybe take it to the industry perspective, they fail. They don't reproduce, they don't scale properly, or there are other barriers along the way. Today, we have a lot more abilities to take what you could say are tools and make them into products. But we also have, you'll hear a lot this term tech bio is like a big, so you have AI ML in one space, you have traditional biotech over here, and now there's this convergence in the tech bio. So we might call ourselves like a tech bio company because we're integrating sort of next generation tech.
You're tech first,
and biology. I mean, I wouldn't even say tech first. We are both. The only way that our product can get made is by marrying both together. And not saying that biotech has not had machine learning models. So it is math. At the end of the day, but I think there's this more harmony between the two because traditionally, say Silicon Valley and Boston biotech have not really intermingled very much. Now you're starting to see that. So it's all three of those together of sort of the convergence of next gen tech is rapidly evolving. Gene editing. I mean, we have a gene edited product that's now been approved by the FDA to treat a sickle cell disease, like that got approval through Vertex and CRISPR recently. When I started at Bluebird Bio in 2015, you were just thinking about gene editing as a product, and like the progression and iterations of tech coming out of these top institutions or any institution really is rapid. So it's all that together is making this sort of what I say is the golden age of biotech. And the problem actually is the lack of people to get those products through to help patients in need because it's a hard job.
Absolutely. Well, I want to dive into a little bit about, as you said, people are needed. For yourself, you've worked in this sector, biotech sector, since 2015. want to learn a little bit more about you, and more specifically, you're a person tackling this problem not only from the science end, but from the business end, from the leadership end of things. And you're second year at HBS, so you started in 2022, 7 years after working, at least since 2015. Why did you decide to pursue an MBA, and specifically an MSMBA program, after so long, rather than kind of like just continuing your work in the industry?
Yeah. So I've been really fortunate to work on the lab side of amazing biotech companies, and have seen the rapid growth. I've seen a lot of things happen inside companies. So I began to understand how they might function from sort of bottom top bottom. I think a lot of people in their careers might think where they want to go long term. Not everyone needs to have an aspiration to lead a company or be a CEO. Everyone has interests, and I think it is amazing that people go in different directions. I thought very early on about where I wanted my long-term impact to be. I don't want to use the word legacy because it's not something that I don't think of that word. I just think of what I wanted to do long-term impact-wise. And I thought my impact, at least from these companies, could be better served outside the lab. So I knew for quite a while that I wanted to transition away from the lab and didn't know exactly where to go. Not having a PhD can limit some of your transitions when you're a scientist, even though I had a master's degree already, away from the lab into different kind of leadership roles within research. And so I think the MSMBA at HBS started right around COVID time. And we all had a lot of time to think about what our next steps would be. And I actually saw the promotional video for this biotech dual degree program and said, that's it. That is the program that I was meant to do, because it's meant to bring scientists such as myself that have varied interests into the business environment, teach them the acumen, to speak business essentially, and see. It's almost going to be expected that biotech business leaders of the future need to not only speak business, but speak science, because the two sides of the equation don't often efficiently speak to one another. Not that they don't talk, I'm not saying that, but since you speak different jargons,
right,
whether you're a scientist or a business person, I think there are a lot of decisions that can be made earlier, more efficiently, less cost, if you know how to sort of navigate both of those waters at once. And so, so I knew immediately I wanted to get into this program, and it has been amazing ever since. This dual degree has allowed me to put a biotech lens on every single one of my classes.
Yep.
So that when I took that first finance class, or entrepreneurial finance, etc., I know how I'm going to take that lesson I learned from the day and put it into my kind of future career.
That's awesome. Good job, MSMBA marketing. Definitely doing some work promoting the program.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Yeah,
absolutely. Let's dive into a little bit about the future that you see, beyond even just gene therapy, AI's applications. We've seen a tremendous increase in lifespan over the last few decades. We've seen a lot of science fiction ideas that we thought would never happen, but is happening. Good or for ill. Actually, recently, Elon Musk and Neuralink just did clinical trials, human trials of their, I believe, it's a microchip that allows you to use your brain function to control like a screen or a functionality. Yeah. What are your thoughts on all this? Either that example or more broadly, the seemingly rapid, exponential acceleration of technological and scientific advancement.
Yeah, I love longevity science.
Yeah.
So I before, let's see, last summer, one of the roles I had was actually working with a CEO at Rejuvenate Bio, which is a company out of San Diego that was from kind of the George Church lab, which is one of the labs here that a lot of people in the field are aware of. And they actually work on gene therapies for age-related diseases. So they don't say they're trying to cure aging or prevent aging. They're trying to tackle age-related diseases by sort of rolling back the clock. So we are, just like I said earlier, we're at this convergence of tech, bio, and really data and knowing how to use that properly.
Yeah.
We're starting to learn more about the biology of aging, way more than we did 10 years ago. So in the fall, I took an amazing biology of aging course as part of my dual degree with Amy Wagers here at the graduate school. And she's been teaching this class for, I think, probably 10, 15 years. An amazing professor, but she walks us through, what is the definition of aging? The biggest problem a couple years ago was that no one knew what the definition of aging was. So if you go to a clinical trial, you have to have an outcome in mind to have a successful clinical trial.
Yep.
And if you don't know how to measure what aging is, you can't have a clinical trial. So that's always been the crux. So companies like Rejuvenate said there are age-related diseases, so some heart problems, arthritis, etc.
Yep.
You can go into the clinic with the therapy and say, at least for these age-related diseases, our therapy did X, Y, and Z, and bridge that over into maybe other spaces of, say, rejuvenation or regeneration. I'm a huge proponent of longevity science, but I will say with any sort of trend or really hot science, there are many different ways to message what the current state of the field is, and some do more of a kind of salesperson job, and some do it from a really core science job. So you get that whole span. But when there's money flowing in, you're going to get many different personalities that are selling the product as well.
Of course. And then we've seen some influencers or some, trends in this, Brian Johnson spending, I think he's probably one of the most well-known individuals of spending on himself. And that sales kind of like his brand of like, I'm going to live as long as possible, spending millions in doing so. We've also seen in science fiction, of course, like a lot of, there's a few Netflix shows that have tackled this. You can transfer it. I forgot the movie, but like you transferred age because somebody is a genetic match from a young, and then there's like altered carbon, which I'm a big science fiction fan. Do you view these technologies as actually being achievable and achievable in the shorter term, like in the span of our lifetimes, or achievable, of course, perhaps one day in the longer term, maybe unfortunately not when we're here?
Yeah. So I would say the realistic kind of scenario is not going to be you're going to give a couple years like a credit card to people anytime soon. What is achievable, and we talked about this in Amy's class, is you want to extend the time that you are healthy.
Right.
Not necessarily life. I mean, extending lifespan is amazing, but if you're end of life or in a nursing home, you don't need to extend that time there, right? You want to extend the time that you're a healthy individual. I think that will happen for sure. So these products, when they're tested in the clinic or being tested right now, are directly going to show benefits that are system wide. So a really good example that no one expected is the GLP-1s for obesity. So Wegovy, Ozempic, they thought initially it was going to be for, say, diabetes or maybe obesity-related conditions. It turns out that it's actually also targeting mechanisms of systemic-wide anti-inflammation, and it's lowering all sorts of what we call comorbidities. So, a lot of obese individuals also have a lot of other systemic issues.
Yeah.
All of those are going away. So you might think it's common sense, but now we're measuring that in the clinic. We are really close at multiple classes of drugs that will enable us to, say, extend that health span. And when you extend that health span, I think that the lifespan will also be increased over time. So that's coming for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited to follow it.
That's fantastic. We're coming up on time here, but I think, our last bit, I want to talk with you ultimately about, you're about to graduate. Are you going to be kind of KiraGen Bio full time? Is this going to be your thing after graduation?
Yes, KiraGen Bio is and will be my full-time endeavor. We are fully committed, and I'm excited to be able to kind of wake up every day and get to work.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Aaron, for coming on the podcast, sharing with our listeners a little bit about this fantastic new venture you're making in the biotech space, and a little bit about yourself. And all that you're doing.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.